What is up, New York Giants fans? We're gonna have to change some clips in that intro video relatively soon. Rough patch, rough week, but we're here to talk about it. I have a very special guest joining us. I'll bring him up in just a moment. But first, folks, welcome to the show, Big Blue Avenue, Week 11. If you're just watching us for the first time this week, make sure to go check our Monday episode with George Bristol of the Big Blue Wrecking Room. George is a huge Giants fan from upstate. He placed top 7 in the best Giants man caves in the state of New York. So make sure to go check that out. We talked about Brian Daboll's firing. And if you're new, make sure to check us out on all of our social media platforms on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Big Blue Avenue or X, whatever you call it. And yeah, it was a rough week. It was a very, very rough week for this football team. Obviously, Daboll is out. Kafka is in. Jackson Dart is in concussion protocol. Jameis Winston is likely the Week 11 starter. It's all but confirmed at this point. Yeah, they announced it, but they're still waiting to – they have not officially ruled Dart out yet. They will not be doing that until probably tomorrow. But, key takeaways from this week, guys. We know Dart is the future franchise quarterback of this team. I don't want the Giants rushing him back from concussion protocol. I read a stat somewhere, and it was very alarming that Jackson Dart was on pace to have 16 trips to the medical tent this season. He might as well get his own personal medical tent, and he was on track to get hit, I believe it was 75 times through the first 7 starts or whatever that number was. But I want to introduce my guest here, Campbell on the Call. Make sure to go check out his new platform, Brady Campbell from Long Island, New York. Brady, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Excited to be back on the show. First time, I think, this season. Wish it could have been under better circumstances, of course, but feels like every season it's somewhat similar. At least there's been a lot more flashes this year, but in the end, it's kind of more of the same, I guess. Definitely an interesting week, though, to join the show for sure, but I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, I was going to say, what a time to have you on. And I kind of want to throw you right into the fire here. And folks, if you're watching, make sure to drop a comment, leave a like, share this video with your friends, share another friend. We're not hungry for likes. It helps with the algorithm on Facebook specifically. So it gets shown more to more people if you leave a like. So we do appreciate that. Brady, first off, what was your initial reaction when you heard the news of Brian Daboll's firing?
Yeah, I can't say I was really all that surprised. The only question I felt like at this point, unfortunately, was were they going to give him the rest of the season or not? But waking up to that news or initially it wasn't really until like the middle of the afternoon, which was a little odd. But I can't say I was all that shocked, because it just seems like the locker room, you kind of hear like stories. You're not really sure what to make of them. I was a big Daboll fan. It was hard to not be a big fan of his after his first season here. And it seemed like we were headed on the right track. And now we're kind of stuck in limbo and falling backwards. But this season, so many flashes. Dart has looked great. That was kind of the story, give Dart, give him an opportunity with Dart. And Dart's look great, especially given the circumstances. Our number 1 receiver is out for the year. Basically, his best friend and our new star running back goes down for the rest of the season. And he's still battling out there. The offense as a whole, I don't really know what to make of the offensive line. Like some weeks they look like they are serviceable enough. And I think a lot of that is also Dart's ability to kind of move the pocket, but the defense is a whole different story we'll get to. But yeah, as far as Daboll's concerned, I can't say I was really that surprised. It's just so unfortunate, especially as us fans. It just feels like we're right back to square one again. Now, another question with it was the rest of the coaching staff, the GM and all that. And as of right now, everyone's staying put, which I don't know if I totally agree with. But yeah, for sure. Like, I wanted to root for Daboll so much. He seems like a great guy. As I said before, like, there have been the stories, like, of course, a few seasons ago with Wink Martindale and even some stuff that's come out like recently with Kafka a few games back. But, obviously never want to see anyone get fired. But I do think for the Giants, like, the flashes have been there this season for them to really compete again. They have competed in these games, but when you keep blowing fourth quarter leads, someone's going to get fired. And unfortunately, Daboll was kind of that first guy.
Yeah. I'm kind of in a similar boat as you. There has been a lot of news lines that have come out this week, storylines, I should say. But the real reason why I think he's gone, it's the mismanagement of Jackson Dart. I think that was the final straw, and that's why Dart was thrown out to the Lone Wolves, to get destroyed, quite frankly. I mean, his brain is basically going to turn into a vegetable at this rate, and we can't afford that to happen. So Brian Daboll had to go, just too many designed quarterback runs. If you look at a quarterback like Drake May, for example, on the New England Patriots, he's really good with his legs, but does not run as many designed QB runs. You can't just run Jackson Dart behind your offensive lineman and him throwing his shoulder into linebackers and DBs all season long and expect that to be a sustainable success. It is not. And that's a big part of the reason why I think Brian Daboll did get fired. We also heard a rumor this week about the Eagles game. When Theo Johnson dropped that pass, apparently Daboll went ballistic, exploded, and threatened to, again, take the play calling duties away from offensive coordinator Mike Kafka, who was the one coordinator he did not fire in his time as the Giants head coach, right? In 2022, they made the playoffs, great. But then in 2023, right, you paid Daniel Jones all that money. You tagged Saquon. You brought him back. The offensive line looked atrocious. A lot went wrong for the Giants that year. So who took the fall for that, right? Bobby Johnson took the fall. And then Wink Martindale took the fall. We know how that drama went. And a lot of his assistants got let go because the defense regressed a little bit with more talent that season. Then in 2024, they hired Shane Bowen, and Daniel Jones was basically the scapegoat of 2024, right? No Saquon anymore. 2025 comes along. Yeah, you could argue Shane Bowen's been bad, but this is the problem. Brian Daboll was a coach on the hot seat. You're not going to get the best coordinator talent when your head coach is on the hot seat, right? And ultimately, that's why they were stuck with the marriage of Shane Bowen. And whether Brian Daboll likes it or not, or if Giants fans like it or not, Daboll was tied to Daniel Jones. It was a marriage, right? They overachieved the first year. That set them back 5 years, in my opinion. 6-11 in 2023, 3-14 in 2024. Drafting Jackson Dart. Daboll would still be the head coach right now if he was able to better manage Jackson Dart, even if they're 2-8. It's not the collapse in Denver. It's not the collapse in Chicago. It is the fact that he cannot keep any of these star players on the field because of his ruthless play calling. That is exactly what it is. In fact, there was a content creator who made a post about it, and Cam Scatteraboo liked the post. I think, Brady, that might tell you everything you need to know. Do I think the blown fourth quarter leads have also something to do with it? Yes. But the final straw that broke the camel's back was the mismanagement of Jackson Dart.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's kind of a combination of really those two things. But of course, Dart now being out for who knows how long. And I agree with you. Don't rush him back. But yeah, the mismanagement of Dart and listen, Dart, I don't know if you saw like I saw a lot of the Gruden clips popping up again when he was interviewing Dart before he got drafted. Dart's got to be, for sure, a bit more careful himself. Like he does take more hits than he probably has to. He could slide more often. He's a little reckless. As we saw, I mean, this game, I think the hit kind of to the head and the shoulder led to him fumbling in that case, but
Sure.
he's not the most careful with the football either when he's running. So a little bit of the onus is on him as well, but Daboll's certainly putting him in these positions and no real kind of safety behind it.
What do you think is next for Daboll now that he's out as the Giants head coach?
I mean, I've heard talk about him maybe getting an OC job or something in that realm somewhere else. I'm trying to think. I'm not really up to date on exactly. Obviously, we're mid-season, but what teams might need that? But I don't know if I see him getting a head coaching job at least immediately or for the next several years. And I mean, who knows? With all these stories kind of coming out, whatever, like true or not, or partially true, whatever, like it's certainly not helping his case to eventually maybe get a head coaching job somewhere else, specifically in the NFL. So I think, he maybe could still land in an OC job because he is a pretty solid offensive coordinator. We saw, he helped mold Josh Allen, which was kind of the big thing. And then he left to go to the Giants, and now Josh Allen's, MVP candidate, MVP winner, constantly leading the Bills to the playoffs. So, he's a great offensive mind, and I wouldn't really see any problem of him getting a decently big role still in the NFL. But for a head coach, not to say he's definitely done, but I think it's going to be a little while before he gets thrown back in that conversation for most teams.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think he was an excellent offensive mind. He could just not manage a whole team in the process. And he lacked professionalism on the sidelines. I think if he is to land a head coaching job next season, the only team that will take a chance is not even in the NFL. It will be the Penn State Nittany Lions, who are looking for a James Franklin replacement. I do think that might be worth a shot for them. But pro-wise, no, I agree. You're 100% right. And yeah, typically on this show, we have a Player of the Week segment every week. I'm going to skip it this week because of all the stuff that has been going on. And then quickly address the timeline that led to Kafka becoming head coach, Brady. So Daboll, when he was dismissed, Shane spoke when the team was supposed to have their regularly scheduled team meeting on Monday. And Kafka addressed the team for the first time as the man in charge. And the essence of his message was that this was not easy for anyone. That Daboll was the reason why he and so many players were in that room. We know there's been a lot of moves already that have been made this week. One of them in particular was that Mike Kafka elevated, Tim Kelly to the offensive coordinator position. Just, does this team get better in any areas with Mike Kafka at the helm, or do you think this is sort of a continuation of, Brian Daboll and his coaching umbrella without the hot temper?
It's really hard to say because I can't lie. Obviously, once again, 2022, great year for us as we finally got back. Things were looking up. The last few seasons, at least as far as like play calling, which is obviously a huge part of it. Like I was not a Mike Kafka fan. Obviously, our talent wasn't great. We weren't a great team. But it was still so painful to kind of watch just the super conservative play because it was not only like was the team not good, like the play calling was just like boring and not exciting. And, even with Daniel Jones, and now he was kind of maybe a borderline MVP candidate. Now his teammate, is one of the front runners, but he's still doing a great job with Indy. So as far as his expectations though with Kafka, like they're not that high for me. I think it's kind of, I don't think it really changed from my expectations that much with Daboll, which is like, this team's competing. Their only 2 wins are against great football teams. They should have 3 or 4 more wins against, I guess, decent football teams. And the Broncos I consider to be pretty good as well. So I could see them winning a few more games. And now, of course, Jameis was named the starter this week and perhaps going forward over Russ, which I kind of wanted to see Jameis be the QB2 behind Dart for a while now. Because even last week when Dart went down, Russ has his moments, but I just Caleb Williams takes in the winning touchdown, and I really didn't have any hope for that last drive. Not to say Jameis would have taken them down the field, but Russ just kind of too small and too slow now in the pocket. I will say it's going to be fun. Jameis Winston's a character. He has his great moments. He has his pretty bad moments. Sometimes he has them all in the same game. I will say Kafka's kind of play calling, and I think that has a lot to do with Dart being a rookie and being as talented as he's been. The play calling and the overall kind of offensive aggression has more been there, and I think that certainly helped them kind of grow these leads, even though they don't always hold on to them. So it's just, I was never the biggest Kafka fan. Like I was kind of waiting for him to get let go at some point during off seasons or during the season. But he's kind of redeemed himself, I guess. And obviously I'm going to be rooting for him. And of course they did say this is kind of his audition to maybe stick around. I don't think I necessarily want him beyond the rest of the season because there are plenty of good names out there and they might not work out, but you never know. I just don't know if Kafka like mid-season can like become an interim head coach and really kind of bring this team back at least enough where it's like he's a realistic candidate. I'm sure they'll still kind of interview him, but I just don't know if he's like head coaching material to the extent of they'll just throw him in mid-season and like he'll kind of get these guys, back kind of as a team. Cause it seemed like, I mean, on the defensive side of the ball and all that, like maybe Daboll was losing the locker room a bit, but I just don't know if there's enough there for really this guy to garner enough attention, especially from the fan base. Cause I know I'm not the only one that wasn't the biggest Kafka fan as OC,
No.
but he certainly, he got his chance now with the firing of Daboll. So,
yeah,
I'm rooting for him, see what he can do as the coach, but like, I don't have my hopes up per se as like anything changing, especially obviously this season pretty much over, but hoping to still see flashes, but I don't know if I'm going to see much difference.
Yeah, you said it best. I mean, I don't think there's too much more I could add to that other than, don't expect too much. Don't expect the team to necessarily get better. I mean, maybe you get that interim head coaching jump for 1 week. I don't see it lasting anything past that. I mean, yeah, I'm not thrilled about it. But he is the best option with who is currently on the staff. It is not going to be Shane Bowen. We all want to run him out of town. No. The fact that he didn't get fired with Brian Daboll is disgraceful. I think Daboll was better at his job by far compared to Bowen at his job. But the head coach, that position, usually is the first one to take the fall in these types of situations. Tim Kelly being elevated to OC, that's interesting. He was the Titans offensive coordinator in 2023 under Mike Vrabel, and he was the Texans OC from 2019 to 2021. So he has 4 years of experience as an offensive coordinator. With the Titans, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, he was that bad. It was sort of like, well, Vrabel was getting fired, and they just didn't want to retain him along with most of that, the rest of the coaching staff. And he got the job with the Giants. So as the tight ends coach, and I think he's done a fine job. But business as usual for Joe Shane, right? I mean, we used to see him at Ranger games with Brian Daboll. We used to see them going out all the time and, laughing and taking good photos together, But maybe it was all smoke after all. Maybe it was like, when you're in a relationship and it's those early months and then it reaches its peak and then kind of like, I don't know if I'm meant to be like best friends with this person or not. And then the business sort of gets into the way. But so far this week, Joe Shane has continued to operate normally. The Giants signed kicker Ben Sauls and tight end Zach Davidson to the practice squad this week. Davidson, a former Buffalo Bill, shocker, and Ben Sauls is a UDFA. We know Graham Gano is headed back to injured reserve with a neck issue. And that's another reason why I think Daboll got let go. It was just so many reasons at once. And yeah, you could blame Joe Shane for this as well. The inability to replace Graham Gano. I mean, this is year 4 with Graham Gano. He's been on the team since the start of the Joe Judge era. And he's 38 years old. He's been injury prone, not just this year, not just last year, each of the last 3 seasons. Holy smokes, guys. He cannot be this kicker anymore. Jude Mikatomne was not the answer either. He's an international player. I think they jumped him up too soon. He's still getting used to the NFL game. He kind of got a bad rap for those missed kicks in the Denver game. He's more of a practice squad guy anyway. Younghoe Koo, I mean, he's real shaky. He can't hit anything past like 40, 45 yards anymore. So Ben Sauls, this could be his job. In fact, when Brady, his mom liked my post when I put out on Twitter that Giants signed Ben Sauls to the practice squad. So we'll see. 24-year-old kicker, 4th kicker this season on the Giants roster. He has never kicked in a regular season game. And then for Zach Davidson, he is a 2021 5th-round pick by the Minnesota Vikings, spent the last 3 years with the Bills, 6'7", 251, had 1 catch last year in 3 games played. I mentioned Graham Gano heads to IR, and then the Giants also worked out 4 players: Trace Ford, who is with the team during the offseason, safety Micah Abernathy, Tysheem Johnson, another safety, and cornerback Miles Purchase. Now, the big news of the week, and this is where I want to get your expertise, is Jameis Winston being named QB1 for Week 11. And I watched his press conference yesterday, Brady, and he was singing, he was feeling himself, he was having a grand old time. He's the 3rd quarterback to start a game for the Giants this season, 10th year in the league at 31 years old, and he's used his experience to impress the coaching staff, being a leader, and his positive energy to help uplift his teammates. And ultimately, I think Kafka, a change of guard at head coach, a change of guard at quarterback. It's not necessarily Dart. Let me be clear. It's Dart's job. When he clears concussion protocol, he will be the starter. But Winston is above Russ at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And about you, Brady, I mean, you kind of alluded to it before. I think it's the correct move, and I am not expecting to beat the Packers this weekend, but we know what he can bring to the table, and now it'll at least be an exciting game. If it was Russ starting, I'd have the game on, but I'd be busy doing other stuff in the background. I would not give a rat's ass, quite frankly.
Yeah, I agree. Jameis on the field, off the field, he's an easy guy to root for, whether he's a Giant or not. But I remember them signing him and Russ and drafting Dart, and it was like, well, they might not win a whole lot of games, but at least the QB room will be fun to watch. But finally seeing Jameis get the start, and he impressed in preseason as well. Dart was phenomenal. Russ, looked like Russ. He was good, and he had a few like bad interceptions. Jameis had 1 or 2 as well, but I don't really know what to expect. Kind of like you, not really a win. But the Packers have been shaky, and Jameis, he can throw for a lot of yards. He could throw a lot of touchdowns, interceptions. I really, it's hard to like get a prediction on this game for him other than, we are still the Giants with a new coach now playing the Packers. But yeah, I think I almost from the beginning, or at least when Dart took over, I kind of was almost done with Russ. Like, not saying like cut him per se, because he's still a good veteran presence. And we have seen, a few years ago, Daniel Jones would get hurt and then Tyrod Taylor would come in and like get hurt in the same game. And you'd have Saquon running like wildcat plays for like a quarter until one of
that game
came back. So, but I do think like Jameis, he's a little bit younger. And I just think at this point, Russ is a little, not that Jameis is like the most agile guy, but Russ is kind of a statue back there where I feel like Jameis, still has a little bit more talent on his side. So I'm definitely excited. We also, I don't know if you mentioned the Hodgins signing today. 2022 hero Isaiah Hodgins back with the team. So I remember seeing him on like the practice squads earlier this season. I'm like, they should bring him back. He was one of the best players, a huge reason why the Giants got to where they were. Obviously not like a superstar per se, but it's fun to see him back. And I mean, once again, you'd rather the team be good, but at least like Jameis is so fun to watch. You have Hodgins back. There is some hope for the future with it's not like half of these games are just blowouts. Like a lot of them they've either should have won or at least are hanging around in. So there's definitely a lot of hope with this team. And I can't help but be excited to kind of watch the game this Sunday. I'm not really expecting a win, but kind of like you said, the interim head coach, a lot of times you see like the team like really take that into their next game and maybe pull off a big upset or at least, take the Packers right down to the wire. So we'll have to see, but this team is very slowly, I feel like, trending upwards. But I definitely feel like the quarterback decision with Dart out was certainly the right move with Jameis.
Yeah, and I think this perfectly leads into the next point as far as Hodgins goes. This is why Joe Shane should not be 100% safe, because we're happy about getting Isaiah Hodgins back. That says we have not done enough to address the wide receiver position.
Oh, yeah.
Jalen Hyatt is an inactive every single week. He doesn't play. Gunnar Olszewski gets more reps than Jalen Hyatt. In fact, Gunnar has a touchdown. So no Gunnar slander tolerated. And they lost little Jordan Humphrey off waivers to the Broncos. That's the risk of keeping a guy like that on the practice squad. And why was Humphrey still on the practice squad and why was Hyatt on the 53? Why can't they just cut Hyatt? Why? Like he is useless. Daboll's gone. Daboll's the one who executed that trade up for him. Why is he still around? Why is Evan Neal wasting a roster spot at this juncture? He's on the injury report this week, Brady?
No, I had no idea.
Did you know that?
No.
He is on the injury report with a hamstring. He did not practice today with a hamstring injury. How the hell do you get a hamstring injury when you haven't played a single snap all season? In fact, you haven't dressed all season.
I really don't understand it. Between that and like Hyatt, like I know there's the thing that it's like, oh, like, our regime drafted him, but it's like you don't utilize him. And it's like, oh, well, you put him in for a few plays, his speed and all that, but like they don't even use that like for like a decoy. He just dresses and takes up a roster spot along with Evan Neal, who I thought they were gonna try to move to guard. I guess that didn't really work. They worked him out in the preseason, and then I really don't know why these guys are still on the team.
Yeah, they should just cut a Zudu too off of IR. I don't know why they have him on injured reserve to return. That was another bad draft pick by the Giants. That was the first red flag of the Joe Shane era for me, drafting him in the third round, by the way. Now, I will say this. I think he's gotten better at his job over the first 4 years, but we're not where we want to be. We're in a good, clean salary cap space because we've let a lot of talent walk away. And we still have restrictions. There was no way we were trading for a receiver at the trade deadline because we were financially handicapped because the Giants, they had to overpay for Paulson Debo because they missed on Deonte Banks' draft pick. They had to overpay for not Tyler Newman, Javon Holland. They let Jason Pinnock go in free agency, who would have been a much cheaper option. Now, yes, Holland is an upgrade over Pinnock, but it's just moves like that get me mad. Now, let's get into the meat of this Packers game, Brady. I could sit here and talk about Joe Shane forever, man. It's been a long 4 years with him at the helm, and we'll see. Right now, it looks like he's safe, and he'll be leading the search for the next head coach. But anyway, Packers are favored by a touchdown, 7.5 officially. However, the Giants have won the last two meetings. Before the win against the Eagles this year, I think the best feeling as a Giants fan was that Monday Night Football win back in 2023 against Green Bay with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. And the Packers have not beaten the Giants since 2019. So it's been 6 seasons. And the most important factor here that I think the Giants could use to the advantage is Green Bay does not have their leading pass catcher anymore. Tight end Tucker Kraft is out for the season with a torn ACL. So they're waiting for that new number one passing target to emerge. It might be Romeo Doubs. Christian Watson is back healthy. They targeted Dontavion Wicks 10 times last week. But they need to figure it out quick because they are on a 2-game losing streak. They've scored under 14 points in back-to-back games. A tough loss on Monday Night Football to the Philadelphia Eagles, Brady. Quickly here, just how do you game plan for this if you're the Giants? Green Bay, yeah, their offensive struggles, but defensively too, they're going to show up. X is going to show up. It's an Xavier McKinney revenge game. How do you game plan for him and this Packers offense? There's a lot that could go into this here, but I just feel like this team hasn't mentally recovered yet from the Daboll firing, and they're trying to prepare for this game. And I just don't know how this is going to pan out.
Yeah, and that's kind of the risk you take with the midseason firing of like a head coach. Like, sure, you could get that one game, like, sparks the team, but like there's so much going on too with your quarterback's injured and all that. And in the middle of the week, now you got to transition to, keep playing games. You still got a little less than half a season left. And at the very least, go out there, try to play spoiler for a team that, as you said, lost their best pass catcher. They're struggling mightily on offense. They've already lost to Cleveland and Carolina in like games where they've held the opponent. The defense held the opponent to minimal points, and the offense just couldn't do much themselves. So I'm sure they'll find their number one guy this week against this defense and secondary, who maybe not so much the secondary, but the defense coming into the season, specifically the pass rush, who last game wasn't even terrible. They just couldn't get Williams on the ground, and when they did, there was a penalty in the secondary. But yeah, McKinney, Parsons isn't hurt, right? He's playing as far as I saw, I think. Like, he doesn't have an injury, I don't think. Micah Parsons. Yeah, so you got their defense is still extremely good. Like I said, despite those losses to teams they probably should beat, they're holding a lot of teams to minimal points, including the Eagles last Monday. The Eagles are a great defense, and the Packers just couldn't score. So for the Packers, it almost feels like a get-right game against a team that's not great, can compete, But also now in coaching turmoil in the middle of the season, like how's that going to affect their confidence at all? But also, like for the Packers team that's really struggling, it could also be a possible trap game for them. A Giants team maybe rejuvenated a little bit from a change of scenery in the locker room and a new quarterback in Jameis Winston, which we saw that last Packers game on Monday night a few years ago. Tommy DeVito kind of just started to become the guy, I guess, for a few games, and they kind of rode off the Tommy Cutlets energy and pulled off that upset. And it's certainly possible that it could happen again, but don't have my hopes too high. But the Packers are certainly a team right now that they got to start winning, because the Bears, they shouldn't have won last week. And you could argue maybe they're overachieving slightly, but the Bears are looking pretty good. The Vikings are like hanging around 500, like, and then of course the Lions. So like their division and the NFC is a complete gauntlet. And about a year or two ago, we were talking about this team being Super Bowl contenders for the next couple seasons potentially, and that hasn't really panned out that much.
Mm-hmm.
And this season, they could be in trouble, and this is a massive game for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Giants could play that spoiler role this week. Green Bay is on the down right now. So, I mean, how do we contain Jordan Love in this Packers offense? For me, I think it's pressuring him. You got Brian Burns, a guy who has 11 sacks, despite the lackluster scheme where there's no creativeness and there's no, there's just no disguised blitzes or anything. They don't have the elements to really catch quarterbacks off guard. I think Burns is that one guy that could really do a good job at rushing the passer, taking on double teams. They did not sack Caleb Williams last week. I know they had a couple nullified by penalty, but they allowed him to run for 63 yards. They have to finish plays and get sacks. And in 2 of the 3 Packers losses this season, Jordan Love has been sacked 3 or more times. So for you, Brady, I mean, what's the key specifically to slowing down Jordan Love?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think pressuring him is massive, and we kind of seen in these games, kind of like last week too, when the pocket starts to collapse or he's forced to move it a little bit. He's not as great. You give him time, and he'll certainly hurt you. He's maybe not one of those top quarterbacks in the league, but he's certainly shown that he can be the guy for Green Bay. But if this Giants pass rush, this vaunted pass rush, at least what should be, hasn't always been, can get pressure on him, even if they don't bring him to the ground every time, but can force him into some mistakes or some bad passes and completions. But they got to try to get pressure too, because the longer they kind of let Love escape, that could be trouble for our beaten up secondary, or not to mention they could take penalties, and even if we do get the sack like last week, could kind of nullify that. But there's been a lot of noise too about Dexter Lawrence. Obviously, he's had to deal with a lot of double teams, maybe even triple teams the last few seasons, but he's still been so good. And this year his numbers aren't quite there. He did have a sack canceled out last week. Abdul Carter has been great. Not all of like the stats, like the sacks and all that, are necessarily there, but I think this is really a potential game for him to really kind of stamp his presence in the league. And then hopefully Kayvon Thibodeau can set an edge this week maybe, and not allow the running backs or the receivers to get to the outside of him, the tight ends, because I feel like he certainly struggles with that. But I think there's so much potential for this defense this week. I'm not going in with huge expectations over the last several weeks, really. Since that fourth quarter, they were borderline great, other than kind of the end of the Dallas game. But for much of the season, in the fourth quarter, some like switch kind of just flipped in that Denver game. And they obviously played a huge part in blowing that game. And they really just have not been the same since, other than Brian Burns. It feels like he's showing up each and every week. But I feel like this is almost maybe a get right game for them in the sense that if they can get that pressure, I certainly think Jordan Love, with a lot of kind of injuries, most notably Kraft to his weaponry, could be forced into a few mistakes.
Certainly, Love can be inaccurate at times, especially when under pressure. For me, though, specifically, I think it starts with stopping the run, right? And more containing the run, because the Giants have the worst run defense in football under Shane Bowen. Crazy how he's still employed. I know I said that earlier. I'll say it again. Um, Obviously, the Giants are going to have to do something differently. You have a top running back like Josh Jacobs against the Giants' run defense that is surrendering 5.5 yards per carry. Last week, they gave up 171 yards and 2 scores. And Josh Jacobs is a guy who could pound the rock into the end zone. A touchdown in 6 straight games, 8 of his last 9. How does Big Blue contain him? Because obviously without Micah McFadden, I feel like it's going to be very, very difficult. And Green Bay, they have good under-the-radar offensive linemen. You got Sean Ryan at center, guy that we both know very well. Aaron Banks, they signed this offseason to play left guard for them. And then Jordan Morgan, who has done a nice job transitioning from tackle to guard upon entering the NFL. So their interior offensive line, Dexter Lawrence has been quiet this year. I think for me, Jordan Love doesn't even have to do that much for them to win this football game. I mean, I think it's won in the trenches, to be honest with you, and it's hard for me to see them containing Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I do agree with that also. Like the passing game, obviously, we talked about containing that, but it really does honestly start with Josh Jacobs in that backfield for Green Bay. And one of the better backs, I feel like, this season against one of the worst overall defenses and basically the worst, as you said, run defense. But the potential on paper is there with, Dexter Lawrence, Raheem Nunez-Roches, I feel like has made some more plays this season when he's kind of been in the game. And of course we know about all those other guys, but I do agree that McFadden injury really was a killer to the linebacker position. Bobby Okereke's first season here, he was making tackles left and right. And not to say he's has been bad per se, but he's certainly kind of been like Dexter Lawrence this season, where he's a bit quiet. He's missed a few tackles as well. So I'm really going to start in the trenches, and even that second level, even when he might get through kind of that initial hole, can the next guy bring him down? Because once again this season, it seems like missed tackles have certainly been an issue with the Giants as well.
Yeah, that's well put. For me, a couple other keys, obviously protecting the football. McKinney has 2 picks on the year. Giants have a -4 turnover ratio. I think us too, establishing the run, right? I mean, you look at on the flip, their run defense is solid. They have a top 5 run defense in the NFL. They allow under 4 yards per carry. They held Barkley to under 3 yards per carry last week, 60 total. And then last week in Chicago, the Giants did better when they were given opportunity, right? I think Tyrone Tracy had a good game, 14 rushes for 71 yards. That was a season high for him. But the number one is, I think it's protecting Jameis on the offensive side of the ball. Thomas and Illuminor will do their thing. Rashawn Gary's a little scary, and then you got Micah Parsons, but they don't have too much on the interior as far as pass rushing goes. The Packers have allowed the 7th fewest passing yards in the NFL, and a large part of that is they are getting pressure on the edges. Brady, is there anything else that stands out to you as far as keys for the Giants keeping this close down the stretch?
I do think protecting Jameis, because while I kind of mentioned he's a little bit more mobile than Russ, he's not the fastest or most agile guy. And obviously you just want to limit, sacks and potentially even worse than that. Jameis is a guy that likes to air it out. The addition of Hodgins is great. Obviously our receiving core is still not the greatest though. So But Jameis certainly a guy that likes to push the ball down the field. Obviously, the Packers have a solid secondary. We mentioned, of course, McKinney as well. You got to be careful. I'm not saying that their game plan should just be like, even though Jameis might still do this, just shucking it, hoping one of his guys could come down with it, because that can lead to one of his like patented 3 interception games.
Mm-hmm.
Although it could also end up with like 300 yards. But I definitely think protecting Jameis, even some quick throws, trying to get some guys out in space. Wan'Dale's kind of had an underrated season. I feel like he's he's a quick little shifty slot guy too that can maybe make a catch in a little bit of space and break a couple tackles or find some room. Darius Slayton had a great game last week. There were some catches that I was stunned because usually there's catches he should make that he doesn't. You never know what you're going to get when the ball comes his way, but I certainly think the passing game offensively is important. I think the running game, like last week, they didn't do much in the first half, and then they kind of adjusted, and their second half running game played a big part in at least putting them in a position to perhaps win that game. But I certainly, obviously, the Scatterboo loss has been really tough for this team over the last few weeks as he just puts his head down and finds yardage. But Tracy's still been great, and he's probably a bit more shifty as well. But as you mentioned, like I think more so the passing game offensively with the maybe a little bit more lack of pass rushing up the middle. And who knows if you could kind of open that up a little bit. Don't want to do what Daboll did with Dart, but can find maybe Jameis kind of scrambling for a couple QB runs. Hopefully he slides and doesn't take too many hits. But I certainly think that the potential is there for an upset. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think this game could be closer than maybe a few weeks ago a lot of people would have thought.
I agree. And quickly here, we'll go over 2 players to watch for each team. I know you talked about Wan'Dale, but he's one guy that I do want to mention. Leads the team with 602 receiving yards and 53 catches, 2 touchdowns to go with that. He leads the team in receptions, but the next closest player has 20 less receptions. That's how much of a volume player he is. 6 catches or more in 5 of his last 6 games. I mean, I think he is going to be key in this game going up against Packers nickelback Javon Bullard. And then defensively, I think Paulson Adebo, the Giants are expected to get him back this week. 4 passes defended on the year. He hasn't played since week 7 in the Philly game where he got a little bit banged up. And then obviously Jameis too is a little honorable mention. I mean, 4th team Winston has started a game 4 last year, 13 touchdowns, 12 picks with the Browns and 7 starts, 12 games played, 2-5 record. So, there is some recognition there for Jameis. And all in all, I think with Green Bay, with holding their opponents to under 14 points in back-to-back games, I think if you're able to get the ball out quick and early, I think Winston might be able to get the Giants above 14 points this week. I know that's not saying much, but based off of how the Packers defense has played, that's an accomplishment. And for Green Bay here, the 2 that I have, obviously Xavier McKinney. The Packers defense has only forced 6 turnovers all season long, and they need to find a way for him to make plays. He leads the team with 2 interceptions. They're good at getting sacks, not great at causing turnovers. And then on offense for Green Bay, I had a tough time deciding between Romeo Doubs and Josh Jacobs, but I ultimately went with Josh Jacobs. The Giants just can't stop the run. It's the same game plan every week, 5.5 yards per carry. He's got over 230 receiving yards as well. And he ranks 2nd in the NFL with 11 touchdowns. So all in all, I think those are my 2. And then, we can talk about Love, how he likes his tight ends with Luke Musgrave, getting him more involved in Tucker Kraft's absence. But ultimately, Jacobs and McKinney are the two that I think could be potential game changers on Sunday. Brady, how about you? 2 for each team.
Yeah, I'll start with the Giants offensively. I'm going to go with Theo Johnson. We kind of talked about the tight ends a little bit. Theo's kind of had an interesting, I guess, career here, specifically this season. He's had some passes right in his hands that he's dropped. He's also made some great catches, and last week he had himself a pretty kind of, I guess, underrated game in the grand scheme of things. And I feel like the Giants are certainly a team that try to utilize their tight ends in the passing game as much as possible, especially with their receiving core kind of being what it is this year, especially with Neighbors going down. So I think certainly in the passing game, especially, they're going to want to get their tight ends, especially Johnson, more involved, and also just the tight ends, I guess, in general, might need to block extra better this week against guys like Parsons and all those guys coming off the edge specifically. Defensively, I'm going to go with Abdul Carter. So it's kind of been a weird rookie season because you look at some of like the main stats like sacks and all that, and even just watching a lot of the games, like you can almost get a little quiet at times, but he's still probably one of the front runners for Defensive Player of the Year, and he's still making a lot of noise despite maybe not always getting home or not always making like the explosive defensive play. But I think this is an opportunity for him this week. We talked about getting pressure. Obviously, Green Bay is a pretty decent line, but almost like a fresh start for this team. I think the young rookie really has potential this week, especially with Thibodeau and Burns kind of getting a large load of the reps being here for a few seasons now. I think Carter can kind of fit in nicely. I think the scheme this week, we'll see what Bowen does, but I think it could be favorable for him. And then on the other side, Green Bay, you mentioned Jacobs. I'll go with Dobbs because the pass defense of the Giants coming into the season didn't really expect all that much. But if Adebo comes back this week, that could be huge. I expect him to maybe line up against Dobbs for as much as the Giants can, because if Banks is that guy, then we could be in major trouble.
It.
Debo, I think, is huge, but Dobbs is a guy that, he's shifty, plays on the outside a lot too. So they gotta, if they can limit him, they still have several other weapons, but I feel like, especially with Kraft going down, might be Love's number one guy. Even if the last few weeks it hasn't completely looked that way, but I'm sure Love's going to try to get him involved as much as possible. So hopefully the secondary can lock him down as much as possible. And then probably the obvious pick defensively, Micah Parsons. Love it if he'd go up against Thomas as much as possible, because that would certainly stunt his defensive production. But it wouldn't surprise me if he goes on the other side against, say, a Luminor, who has had kind of his off moments this season, but stopping him is obviously one of the most important things as far as one particular Green Bay defensive player and really in the whole NFL. It's nice to get him out of the division. Of course, we still have to play him this year, but I think if they can block him well enough, block kind of the offensive line could do well enough as a whole, give Jameis time, I think the Giants, might have a shot in this game, because I think part of the reason why Jameis's stats are so wacky, especially with the interceptions sometimes, especially like played for the Browns last year. He was, a little bit rushed. And if the Giants offensive line can hold their own against a top pass rushing unit, I think they'll certainly give themselves a shot at least.
Oh, no, absolutely. And then a couple other key players for the Packers, too. We can't forget about Quay Walker. That's another guy who's a really good football player, great linebacker out of Georgia, leads the team with 77 tackles. And then Christian Watson, a big play machine. You mentioned Parsons, and then Rashawn Gary, who's actually their sack leader with 7.5. But Brady, quickly here before we pick the game, take a player from the Packers and put them on the Giants. So steal somebody.
So my first thought was Micah Parsons, but when you think about it, like the Giants are pretty, they don't necessarily need him, at least on paper.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, honestly, this might be not like the best pick because we've seen him on the Giants, but right now I think Xavier McKinney would be a pretty easy choice. He was one of my favorite Giants when he was here.
Mm-hmm.
Now goes to Green Bay, had a great season last year, off to a pretty good first half so far this year. And the Giants have struggled pretty mightily in the passing game. Getting a Debo back's great. Hollins has been pretty solid, but you got Banks on the other side and all that. So I think him, if you want to go with a non-Giants player, non-former Giant, probably Romeo Doubs, just someone in the passing game with the struggles of the receiving core.
No, absolutely. For me, yeah, you took the guy I was going to take. I was going to take Romeo Doubs because obviously we are decimated in the pass catching game. And most importantly, when you have a quarterback, whether it's Dart or it's Winston, you need to make big plays in the pass game. Dobbs has 7 big play catches. He's currently their new number 1 pass catcher after losing Tucker Kraft. And he has 35 catches for 446 yards and 4 scores. So not too shabby if you ask me. I would throw him on the Giants in a heartbeat. Again, they have a good football team, and it's a young football team. You know, Keshawn Nixon, 12 passes defended. You could argue, you know, you could take one of their corners, right? Carrington Ballantyne, Javon Bullard, you know, guys who are under the radar type of guys that, you know, are significant upgrades. And Goofballs saying, what's up, Goofballs, by the way? How about instead of a player, we steal a coach? I will take LaFleur or Hafley. How about Chris Shula? That's a guy I've had my eye on a little bit. Rams DC. He's been on McVay's coaching staff since 2017, and pretty much every coach to lead McVay has had success. I mean, you look Kevin O'Connell. Say what you want about Zach Taylor, but he did get them to a Super Bowl. Liam Cohn, Matt LaFleur, guys like that, you know. I think Chris Shula could be worth a shot. And we know who his grandfather is, and we know his uncle, former Giants OC Mike Shula. So there could be something there. Just a dark horse that I don't think enough people are talking about. But that's more for another show. Quickly here, Green Bay, pretty healthy team. You know, 11 weeks into the season. You know, all guys are banged up a little bit. Nate Hobbs, the only guy for them who did not practice. However, Brady, let's go over ours quick before we pick this game. Jackson Dart, not practicing this week in concussion protocol. Chauncey Golston hasn't played in like 5 weeks. Neck injury. Graham Gano, IR. Evan Neal, for some reason, hamstring. Tyler Nubin, neck. Ugh, he has been a huge disappointment, by the way. Nacho with a toe. Bobby Okereke with the shoulder. Kayvon Thibodeau with the shoulder, did not practice. Darius Slayton with the hamstring, again, did not practice. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Brady, as the guest, you can pick first. Who do you think wins, and what is your final score?
Jeez. On top of not winning games, it seems like every year they can't stay healthy. Yeah, so I mean, I feel like I've said it a bunch of times. I think this game could be a bit closer than maybe a few weeks ago, thinking, oh boy, we got the Packers. I do think this team will be a bit rejuvenated with kind of the new kind of coaching change. Jameis always brings a lot of energy. Don't really know what to expect from him. I think the defense shows up a little bit more this week and stifles the Packers offense enough. In the end, though, I do think the Packers get back on track. I do think it's going to be maybe a little bit more low scoring than some of the Giants games where like last year they'd only put up like 6 points a game, and this year they're losing like 38-33 or something like that. But I'm going to say that the Packers hold on by about a score. I'm going to go 23-17 Green Bay.
All right. I'm going 24-14 Green Bay. I think we're the perfect defense, unfortunately, right now for their offense to get back on track because of our inability to stop the run. So that's where I'm going at there. Kafka loses his first game as interim head coach, and the Giants drop to 2-9 on the season with Brian Daboll enjoying some pizza and laughing at his TV screen. That is where I am at. We'll see, though. I think the future is bright for this football team. Just another injury-plagued season, not enough depth, poor personnel, and hopefully with another draft or two, Joe Shane can try to get this right. If he does remain the GM, we'll left to be seen what happens at the end of the season with him. But right now, last two drafts, I think he's done well. And Brady, thank you for joining tonight. I appreciate your time. And as a way of saying thank you, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I'm currently in the sports broadcasting world, working production assistant for MSG, also play-by-play and production for LI Sports Network. And I have two Instagrams. Just kind of like my main personal one, Brady Campbell 1308. But I also, as of like last week or so, created my more, I guess, professional Instagram. So it's my last name, Campbell, Campbell, on the call, like calling sports games. All basically like one word, no spaces or anything like that. But yeah, that's where there I am, mainly on Instagram. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm also on LinkedIn, I guess, if anyone out there in the sports broadcasting world or anything wants to connect, Brady Campbell. But yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you having me on to talk some Giants in a very tumultuous week and season.
Absolutely. Continue to grow the Giants fan community. Collaborating with each other all the time is great. Regardless of who it is. And you are definitely a great guest to have on the show. So thank you, Brady. I appreciate that. Folks, we appreciate you all tuning in tonight as well. Make sure to go check us out below on all of our social media handles. He's Brady Campbell. I am Tom Scavetto, wishing you all an excellent evening. Love one another. And without further ado, let's go Big Blue.